This is the Hard Thing Podcast. Today, we are overcoming average. Welcome back to another episode of the Hard Thing Podcast. This is a podcast that helps you improve your life by doing hard things. We're here to help you bridge the gap between where you are, where you want to be, by helping you get over those obstacles that are in your way. And we do that on Mondays by talking with high-performing individuals and listening to their stories of when they've done hard things, and then pulling action items from those stories that you can emulate and work on in your daily life. On Thursdays, we have The Forge, where myself and co-host Ty Crockett put ourselves to the test, giving each other challenges and actually doing hard things. But today, we're talking about doing hard things with a high-performing individual. I actually have an awesome guest on the show. Before I get to that, one quick announcement. For our Thursday show, we rely heavily on challenges that we give to each other. We want to invite you to give us challenges. So go to thehardthingpodcast.com/submit-challenge and submit a challenge to us. And then you can see that come up on the Thursday show. And we're actually doing a monthly challenge as well. So we'll pick our 3 favorite challenges. We'll post those on social media and we'll have you guys vote. And whichever challenge wins, we'll do that, as well as we'll give the submitter of the challenge $20. So go to thehardthingpodcast.com/submit-challenge, submit a challenge to us, and hopefully you'll see that come up on the Thursday show. But let me tell you about today's podcast guest. Today I talk with Scott Miller. He is a dynamite podcast guest. Let me tell you that. He is the host of the On Leadership podcast, sponsored by Franklin Covey, the worldwide organization on leadership. Scott Miller interviews all sorts of high-performing individuals, much like mine, but at a little bit of a higher scale, I'd say, and he reaches 7 million people all over the world. He also wrote 2 books. So he wrote Management Mess to Leadership Success, and his new book, which is actually coming out this May, is called Marketing Mess to Brand Success. And I'm so privileged to have him on the show today. We talk a lot about self-awareness. I would just highly encourage you guys to listen up, take out a pen and paper, and write down your thoughts, and hopefully write down the action items as well that you can do. But without further ado, here's my conversation with Scott Miller. All right. Well, thank you, Scott, for coming on the Hard Thing Podcast. I am delighted to have you here on my show.
Justin, it's my honor. Thank you for the platform today.
Excellent. Well, let's jump into the question that I ask all my guests. Scott, what's the hardest thing you've ever done?
Well, the first idea that comes to mind is parenting. I was single till I was about 41, and then my wife and I got married, and we had 3 boys in 5 years. That was a lot. I don't recommend that. But I'll tell you, as much as I think that's the hardest thing, I think maybe professionally, I have something that's equally as hard. About 15 years ago, we had gathered about 200 business prospects in a conference room for a typical kind of marketing event for the consulting firm that I work for. And I got a call about an hour later that the presenter could not come. He was sick in Chicago and could not fly up that morning. And I tried everything to get him on the plane. And so I ended up having to give the presentation. It was a topic that I had not written a book about, knew nothing about. It was a fairly complicated business process topic. And we had about 150, senior executive leaders that had registered for this event. So can you believe I stood up and gave this presentation? It was supposed to be 2.5 hours. I think I made it maybe 2 hours and 10 minutes. And in hindsight, I probably should have canceled the event because you don't want to waste your prospects' time. So it can impact your brand. But I pulled it out, man. I crammed for about 90 minutes. I had exercises. Oh my gosh, it was the hardest thing I've ever done, was try to talk credibly about a topic in which I had no credibility to people who were significant. I'll never do that again.
I think that's a really interesting experience, because a lot of people struggle with imposter syndrome, this idea that I'm not good enough. In this instance, you were not really an imposter, but you were in a sense kind of bait and switched for what I
was a fraud. Yeah, I wasn't an imposter. I was a total fraud. Now, fortunately, I had enough business acumen and experience, and I had, a large enough, literary knowledge of a broader top. Yeah, it was just soul crushing, Justin.
I'm really curious, because public speaking is something that everyone is going to have to do at some point or another, even if it's just speaking in front of your family. What sort of things did you do to kind of gain the audience's trust and show them that guy didn't show up, but I'm here and I'm still worth listening to?
Yeah, I don't think I disclosed the entire story because it would have destroyed my credibility. I think I told them enough where it
Hmm.
felt as truthful as possible. And my speaking style, by the way, you may not know, I have a stutter. I have a speech impediment. I have a pretty strong
Wow.
stutter my entire life. I've been through, oh my gosh, thousands of hours of speech pathology, speech therapy, braces twice. I have two speech coaches that help me master my public speaking skills. But I think vulnerability and authenticity, right? Just share that you're nervous, share that you're uncomfortable, share not more than you need to, but just enough to build some relatability and authenticity. And most people, the vast majority, will root for you, and they'll pre-forgive any distractions or such. So I had a lot of exercises. I had a lot of, here's an idea, talk amongst yourselves. Let's report back. There's plenty of expertise in the room. I'm not the expert. You're the expert. So there was a lot of facilitation going on that day and not a whole lot of presenting.
I love that. I think that's like one of the main things that substitute teachers do when they go into a classroom and they don't know the kids. They say, here's an exercise, form groups and work amongst yourselves. But
And it's usually some of the best times and some of the best learning comes of that, right?
yeah. And I mean, that's why we all do networking, because you find a lot of value by connecting with your peers and seeing what they're doing. And you actually mentioned that in your book, friending your competition.
Yeah.
So I think that's very relatable. But I'm glad that you mentioned your vulnerability and your authenticity, because with all the challenges in your book, as I read it, I noticed that in order to really do them or try most of them, you have to have a large amount of self-security. And how did you develop that self-security in your life? And what would you advise our audience to do in order to do the same?
Yeah, so the book you're referring to, of course, is Marketing Mess to Brand Success. It's the second book in the Mess to Success series. The first book was Management Mess to Leadership Success. And when I became about 49, by the way, I'm privileged to host what is the world's largest subscribed to weekly leadership podcast called On Leadership with Scott Miller. And it goes to about 7 million people a week. After 150 episodes, I've learned the value of disclosing your own insecurities and not trying to fake confidence. And also, I've had a great career. As the chief marketing officer for a global public company, I started to realize where my strengths were, where my weaknesses were, and started to recognize that vulnerability is a leadership competency. This is not just some, trite phrase or an idea popularized by the very famous, incredible Brene Brown, who I think, brought the power of vulnerability to the forefront. But I have learned that as leaders, people want to be able to relate to you. They want to be able to learn through your mistakes. They like people who are confident enough that they can be humble enough to admit their mistakes and their messes and teach through them and talk through them. So I decided to kind of go all in about 2 years ago. Now, I'm a Catholic, so it's easy for me to confess. This comes naturally to me as my upbringing.
Yeah.
But as I kind of hit 50, Justin, I decided I'm going to spend the next hopefully half of my life, teaching through my mistakes, my journey. Not everything was or is perfect. In fact, all of us have messes. Everybody knows them. Everybody's talking about them. Why not just embrace them and own your mess? Because when you own your mess, you make it safe for others to own theirs as well. Some of my best leadership experiences was having one of my leaders, chairman of the board, CEO, sit me down and say, let me tell you about the time that I wasted this or was sued for that or, messed this up. And their humility was a massive teaching moment for me that allowed me not to make the same mistake, but to recognize that not everybody's perfect. Everyone has perhaps a facade they put on. I don't care how wealthy or successful or what number your book debuted at or how the ratings are on your TV program. We're all the same. Some of us are just have more, pots on the burner. And so more stuff is burning. One of the commonalities that you see amongst all these famous entrepreneurs, successful people, what you see is their success. You don't see all their failures. This is common amongst Seth Godin, Dan Pink, Doris Kearns Goodwin, Matthew McConaughey. I've interviewed them all. These are good friends of mine. And you don't see the 30 pilots that never got off the ground. You don't see the products they launched that failed and never make it to market, right? You don't see the book they wrote that was never optioned by the publisher. What you see is their flashpoint. There is no overnight success. There is overnight fame, usually for the wrong reasons. There's no such thing as overnight success. And so just own your mess. Make it safe for others to own theirs.
Yeah. Overnight fame or overnight infamy, unfortunately, in today's day and age
Yeah.
with news and social media. Um, so I'm pretty young. I haven't had a chance to really be a leader or a manager in any grand sense of capacity or anything like that. So kind of being the devil's advocate, how do you manage to keep, I guess, people's respect and have them believe in you while still divulging these
Yeah.
messes, if you will?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of an art. And what a superb question, because you could become that leader that just vomits all your mistakes and it has no credibility. Why would I ever follow you, right? In fact, I've often asked, are you sure you want to have your whole book series called, Mess of Success? If you're a total mess at everything, no one will follow you. Well, obviously, if you read the books, you realize I've had a few successes along the way. I think humble leaders are more concerned with what is right than being right. I think that's profound. So if you declare your intent, my intent is not to lessen my credibility. My intent is to increase my credibility. So I want to gather you all around and share what is my biggest client mistake, right? What is the worst blog I ever wrote? What was the worst speech I ever gave? And here is why, and here's what I've done differently since then. And here's the lesson I'd like you to learn in this. I think it's all an intent, is that if you declare your intent, my intent is to show you a vulnerable side of some of my failures in the hopes that you'll learn through those and also be mindful of my successes and aspire more to things I've done right and clear of the things I've done wrong. You can be a vulnerable leader by sharing your mistakes while they are balanced with modeling what you want them to see in your own behaviors, right? Is what gets modeled gets repeated. What gets measured gets done. So as a leader, your job is to model what you want to see in the behaviors of the people around you, at the same time to be relatable, trusted enough, and vulnerable that they can also realize that, your path to success wasn't a linear line. So I think it's all about calibration.
That makes sense. And I think doing so actually shows two very important points. One, it connects back to your first chapter in Marketing Mess, that the customer, it's the customer, stupid. Essentially, in doing this, you are saying the mission matters. That's the only thing that matters. I don't matter. So I'm going to show you what I did wrong. Hopefully we can learn from it and get to a successful outcome. And then I think the second thing it does is it starts to create that culture in your business or organization where your subordinates start to understand and know for certain that they can divulge mistakes and hopefully correct them without being punished too much or without being cut off from the organization, which is a very important thing, I'd say.
I would build on that. You mentioned the word culture. I've been in the leadership development industry for 3 decades, worked for the Disney company for 4 years, and now the Franklin Covey company for 25.
Did I lose you? Scott, are you still there?
Book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Trustworthy, confident, forgiving, that's your culture. Most people are gossipy, backbiting, duplicitous, that's your culture. So as a leader, it's your job to set the standard, right, for the culture. And leadership's not for everyone. It's a tough job, right? Not everyone should be a leader of people. I think that's a bit of a misnomer. Mm-hmm. Too often we promote in organizations the top producing car detailer to be the car detailer manager, or the anesthesiologist to be the chief physician, or the top salesperson to be the top sales leader. Wrong. Rarely are the competencies that make you a great individual producer translate to become a great leader. Leadership's tough. It's not for everyone, and not everybody should aspire to it. But if you're going to be a leader, then you got to recognize the spotlight on you, right? And that you have got to be balancing all of the right behaviors. At the same time, be willing to say, listen, we're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. No one wants to work in a culture where you can't take risks. So I like this idea of creating not just a forgiveness culture where you're forgiven if you make a mistake. No, you're pre-forgiven. Listen, Justin, you're pre-forgiven. You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to handle some client calls wrong. You're going to have some reports late. And listen, I'm not giving you permission to screw stuff up. I am giving you permission to learn, recover, share, grow. And once you give people permission, pre-forgiveness, to recognize they're going to take some risks, I think there's a level of intensity that kind of comes down, and people don't want to disappoint. They don't want to cash in that chit, so to speak. I like the idea of creating a pre-forgiveness culture. You're pre-forgiven because you are going to make some mistakes. It's okay. Do me a favor. When you do make the mistake, come and tell me immediately. Don't hide it. Don't cover it up. Don't try to fix it yourself. Let's fix it together, because my experience probably can help fix it faster. But let's learn and grow together. And you have a whole different culture in your organization when people realize the boss understands I'm going to make some mistake, therefore I don't want to. But if I do, I can call him immediately, and hopefully he will rise to the occasion, or she won't, scream or have a meltdown. By the way, if you do create a pre-forgiveness culture as a leader, you got to make it safe for people to tell you the truth. Because if you do then lure them in, or lure them to the side of the pool and push them in the deep end, then you're a fraud, right? So if you say to people, come to me when you've made a mistake, you've got to receive that information calm, deliberate, use it as a growth moment. Because as a leader, your job basically is to handle bad news all day long. And if you can't handle bad news, then you can't be a parent or a leader.
I'm really glad that you brought up parenting right there, because actually my uncle, I think the pre-forgiveness culture is one that parents should instill in their children. My uncle, he and his family decided, he and his wife said they're not going to drink, and stuff like that. And he told his children, I don't want you to drink, but if you drink, come get me, drink with me, and I'll make sure you're okay and whatever. Obviously, he wasn't going to drink, but basically the idea of, if you're going to make a mistake, come talk to me and we'll fix it. We'll work through it together, and we'll figure it out. On the flip side of that, I'm kind of trying to be a contrarian a little bit. How do you create this safe space while still instilling discipline in your subordinates and making those hard decisions when you need to, even though it is a safe space?
Yeah, I once heard that you can't over communicate as a leader. And I think you can. I think you can over communicate. Like, here's a good example. I think we have, politicians, perhaps even as of late, that over communicate. They try to be the expert on everything. They have an opinion on everything, when clearly they're not the expert on everything. I don't think, presidents are, infectious disease experts, right? Or, you get the point, right? So as a leader, you can over communicate. What is important is that when you do communicate, it is concise, it is clear, it is confident, and you repeat it appropriately, and that you set the standard, that you gather people around and say, so let's talk about this. Let's role play this, right? Let's role play 4 or 5 client calls. And we know what? I'm gonna get in the hot seat. So you're gonna see me do it right, and hopefully you might see me do it wrong. But you know what? Put yourself out there as the leader. Make sure that when you do the role plays with your team members, you go first, and don't make it perfect. Don't give it your all, right? Say, at the end, say, oh my gosh, that one was dumb. Did you hear what I said there? And lighten the mood. Let the people know that you're there with them as well. I think it's important as a leader to lessen the divide between your people, to recognize that your job is to model the kinds of behaviors, the kinds of quality standards, set the standard, repeat it, make sure it's attainable, achievable, it's visual, right? This is what the package should look like when it's shipped. Here are the 7 steps. Don't try to recreate the wheel, but if you've got an idea that's better than our process, hey, bring it to us, right? Sometimes we just want you to execute on this process. Sometimes we're open to innovation. Have an open dialogue where people can bring you ideas. And then if you don't want it, say, thank you for that. We're going to stay with the process we've designed. Thank you for bringing that. I'll continue to keep it under consideration. Are you comfortable continuing to execute on the process that we have designed, right? Everything can be a dialogue. If someone takes it too far and wants to reinvent every process, you may need to sit them down and say, hey, listen, someday you're going to be in innovations, but that's not this day. Today you're in execution, and here's the process. Again, I think it comes back to people want to be able to relate to their leader. It doesn't mean you're friends, it doesn't mean you're buddies or pals, but it does mean that you're intentionally creating connections, relationships, that you're trusted. Let me tell you, Justin, there's a human resource myth, and that is that people are an organization's most valuable asset. We've heard this, right? It's not true. People are not a company's most valuable asset. It's total bunk. What is true is it's the relationships between those people that are every barbershop, every nail salon, every mechanic's office, every chiropractor office, every Fortune 500. It's the relationships between those people. Because Justin can be a, certified black belt Six Sigma expert, and Scott can have a Rhodes Scholar license or degree from Oxford. But if the two of us are the smartest people in the room and we can't get along, compliment each other, forgive each other, pre-forgive each other, have each other's backs, we don't need you, because you're going to say something that pisses me off, for sure. I'm going to do something that pisses you off, for sure. And if we can't work through that without bringing the boss over or human resources over, so remember, this new phrase where every business is a technology business, that's very true. And every business is in the same business. I don't care if you're at a nursery selling plants, or you're a theme park, or you're a technology, you're in the relationship business, period. And as a leader, your number one job is to build effective, trustworthy relationships with everyone around you.
Wow. During these podcast conversations, often when my guest says something rather poignant, I'll write that down as a quote. And every business is in the same business. Just made the cut because that's something I have never really thought about before or heard about, but it makes perfect sense because, dumbing it down for someone like me, if you think about businesses like a clock and each person is a cog, the relationships are whether or not they mesh well. And if the gears or cogs don't mesh well, the clock doesn't work.
Well, think about it a step further. I'm glad you found that valuable. Is, most conflict in life comes from mismatched or unfulfilled expectations. Think about that. Nearly all, if not all, conflict in life comes from mismatched or unfulfilled expectations. As the leader, you thought your team was going to do this. As a customer, we thought the business was going to provide that, right? Is that most conflict in life comes from you didn't sit down with the other person or your team or your client or your vendor or your spouse or your children or your mother-in-law and say, I am going to do this. I'm not going to do that. And please don't expect that from me because I'm not going to do that. It requires you to both declare your intent, right? My intent is not to offend you, but I'm not going to bring 70 deviled eggs to dinner tomorrow night. My intent is not to annoy you, but you're not on the path for a promotion right now. You get the point. Is declare your intent. It may require you to move outside of your natural comfort zone and summon a level of courage, confrontation even, that's not consistent with your personality. When you leave things up to chance, when you leave things up to misinterpretation, when you assume the other person knows what you're thinking, you are destined for conflict. That's why great leaders, whether you are a parent, a spouse, a neighbor, a committee member, or the formal leader in a company, you have to summon a level of courage balanced with diplomacy, consideration. You can't just be a gutless wonder and eviscerate everybody verbally, right? You have to be able to articulate a clear outcome, a clear standard, clear boundaries, because absent facts, people make stuff up. And so as a leader, you have to make sure that the facts are as clear as possible, what you will and will not do, what you do and do not expect them in return, and the greater clarity that you can create amongst all stakeholders, the less conflict you will have in every area of your life.
Putting out your own clarity, I think, is one thing, but working with a team and getting them to also reciprocate and give their expectations, I think is also somewhat difficult. How have you learned how to, especially with people who don't want to put forth their maybe desires because they're a little bit more agreeable or things like that? How have you gotten them to come out of their shells and say, this is what I want?
You got to make it safe for them to tell you the truth, right? You have to make it safe for them to feel comfortable speaking up, pushing back, adding their perspective. And so I'll often, as the chief marketing officer, for many years, I was the executive vice president of business development for this global, company, public company. and I would announce a strategy or talk about it, and I would say, hey, Justin, I'd like you to repeat that back to me in your words, not in my words, right? I'm not trying to test your knowledge. I just want to understand, are we on the same page, and might you have any different opinions on it? And so I'll have Justin repeat back to me, what is the goal of the project? What are the issues? And in that, I can gauge whether or not we're on the same page. At the same time, because humble leaders are more concerned with what is right than being right, Justin might repeat it back to me. That's a little bit different. I think, I never thought about that. Justin, wait a minute. When you talked about the supply chain, you said something different. There might be something there. What were you thinking about that? Because that's different than what I thought, and that's okay. Share that. Let me tell you, the key to clarity is trust. The key to clarity is trust. Whenever I give a speech on a stage, 7,000 people, I'll say, raise your hand if you're trustworthy. Every hand goes up. And I say, nope, put your hand down. Who decides if you're trustworthy? It's not you. It's the other person. The other person in the relationships gets to decide, are you trusting? Are you worth being trusted? Have you behaved yourself into a reputation where I can trust you? You do what you're going to say you're going to do. You deliver on promises. You don't overpromise. You don't lure me in and then trap me and embarrass me. You have the maturity, the emotional agility to give me feedback the way I need it. Might be in private, might be through email, might be through text, might be over a walk through the parking lot. That you have the maturity enough to realize that even in a business, all of us are a little bit different. So one strategy does not fit everyone. Parenting's very similar to leadership. I don't mean it to patronize people, but don't declare yourself as being a trustworthy person. Let other people declare you as being worthy of trust. And that comes in your behaviors, consistent behaviors over time. Ask yourself, where you have a conflict in your life, have I earned their trust? Have I behaved in a way where they trust me on their criteria? I know I'm talking a lot here, but this is valuable content, whether you are an informal or formal leader, whether you're starting your career, whether you're in any area of your life where you have some conflict. Don't declare yourself trustworthy. Exercise the emotional agility to say, why should that person trust me? What have I done to earn their trust? I'll bet you'll come up short in many occasions.
Yeah. I think one important key that you mentioned is to judge whether or not people trust you based on their criteria, not yours.
Yeah.
I have a common saying that you should judge people based on their own standards, and I think that falls in line with it. Understand their criteria for trusting you, and then make sure you fulfill it. Have there been any moments in your career or life where you maybe thought that you had people's trust and buy-in, and then you didn't, and it turned out to be kind of a big problem?
Again, when I was the chief marketing officer, there used to be a phrase in the marketing team. There were about 35 associates that reported to me. And the phrase was, best idea wins as long as it's Scott's. And so I read a really famous leadership book called Multipliers, written by Liz Wiseman. I think it's the best leadership book on the market. And she's become a friend of mine, and she's endorsed my books. I strongly recommend your leaders read the book Multipliers. The premise of the book is that as leaders, we are always either multiplying talent or diminishing talent. You aren't either a multiplier or you are a diminisher. You're both. All of us are both. And our job is to be aware of when we are accidentally diminishing people and to become more aware, cognizant of that side of us and lessen the diminishing moments so that we could multiply the multiplier moments. And she has 9 accidental diminishing types: the idea fountain, the always on, the rescuer, the protector, the strategist, the optimist. Well, I'm definitely the idea fountain. Constant ideas all day long, creativity. I'm the genius in the room. And that's my job as the chief marketing officer, is to be the genius in the room. Well, after I read Liz's book, I realized, my job is not to be the genius in the room. My job is to be the genius maker of others, is to pollinate their genius. So I think to answer your question, this adage that best idea wins as long as it's Scott's, really spoke to my personality, my style, my own insecurity, my own perhaps jealousies, my inability to feel comfortable and confident around people who are actually smarter than me, my inability to recruit and hire people who were smarter than me because I feared being exposed. I feared being intimidated. And I'll tell you, I think that the best leaders that exercise the humility and the confidence to go out and recruit and retain people who are noticeably more talented. If you own a mechanic shop, go hire mechanics who are more talented than you. If you are a dentist, hire dentists in your practice who are better than you. And recognize that your job is not to be the best genius. Your job is to be the culture maker, to make them engaged and happy and excited, and to have great dental practices around you and you learn from them. That takes a unprecedented level of confidence and humility to hire people who are noticeably more talented than you are. And I tell you, I wasn't mature enough in my 20s or my 30s, and quite frankly, most of my 40s to do that. And then I've, through all my reading and podcasting, I've realized, oh my gosh, my job is not to be the idea fountain. My job is to be the talent magnet where people trust me to come, and my job to pollinate, to ignite their genius and be very comfortable not being the most creative person in the room. That takes some maturity that I'm too late in my leadership career.
If I could, I'd like to push back a little bit. I don't think you're not being the most creative person in the world.
Am I your longest winded client ever?
Actually, no, not even close. I've had people where I've had like one interjection and then the show ends and we're done. But I think you're not being, rather than being the not most creative person in the room, you're being a not overtly creative person, because you still have to be creative enough to attract those people to come to your organization.
Yeah. I think it's self-awareness. Isn't everything in life come down to self-awareness? What is it like to be married to you? What is it like to be in a meeting with you? What is it like to be on a podcast with you? Do you have self-awareness? As a leader, can you create space, physical, emotional, intellectual space for others? Can anybody feel smart around you? Can you come into a meeting and perhaps recalibrate your energy, your ideas, your genius? Can you hold back a little bit? That doesn't mean that you move to becoming a victim or a martyr, or you allow the quality to lessen, but are you confident enough to hold back and create some space? Are you able to come into a meeting and say, hey team, here's what the outcome needs to be. I'm going to let you all just work on your own for 45 minutes. You're going to have great ideas. I'm going to come back in 45 minutes because honestly, I think the ideas might better exchange without me in the room, because I have a strong personality. I'll have an opinion on everything, and nobody wants my opinion on everything. So I'm going to step away for 45 minutes. I trust you all. I hired you because you all are geniuses in all your own rights. I'm going to come back in 45 minutes. I'm going to give you some space physically, emotionally, mentally, intellectually, and let's come back and let's talk about what are your best ideas. That doesn't mean you have to be a martyr or a victim. That just means you recognize that you are not the genius in every situation. And by the way, no one wants to work for a genius. No one wants to work for the smartest person in the room. I've done that before. It's hard to feel confident about yourself. It's hard to have a good idea. It's hard to want to stay.
Yeah. I feel like when you do this, you're somewhat like an artist who, rather than making themselves the art piece, they've weaved this beautiful tapestry, pulling in different colors, different fabrics, and making it. And then they stand back and let other people enjoy the art. And the art is what shines, but the artist takes great satisfaction in making that weave. And I think it's
wise. Aren't you wise for your years?
No, I'm lucky enough to be able to talk to a lot of people and hopefully make me kind of think outside the box. We've talked a lot about humility, and it's such an important concept, and I wanted to get your take on this. How would you define humility?
I think it's the intersection between confidence and vulnerability. I'm a very confident person. I'm probably overly confident. Some might say arrogant. I hope that's not the case, but I'm sure in some situations that describes me. But I balance that with, I think, a authentic level of vulnerability. One of the first things I mentioned on your podcast was that I have a speech impediment. have a stutter. There are about 30 plus words that I cannot say in public. And it triples in the winter because the cold exacerbates my stutter. And so I think humility is, like I said before, being more focused on what is right than being right. When I'm in a meeting or a conversation, perhaps even with my wife, I like being right. I like to win the arguments. In fact, she'll tell you it's impossible to win an argument with Scott Miller because I'll just wear you out. I'll just, hang on for 3 hours and debate the same point until you're ready to take your life. I think it's the combination of confidence and vulnerability. Recognizing that, you know what? My paradigm, my mindset isn't the only way, right? It's recognizing that all of us have deeply ingrained belief systems and paradigms around other people's points of view politically and economically and socially. And we have opinions on other religions and sexual orientations and geographies, and that these mindsets are deeply inculcated in us from our parents, our grandparents, our school principals, our rabbis, our imams and priests, and that the more self-aware we are of why we think the way we do, the more humility we can exercise. And it takes, I think, a level of confidence to be able to recognize, why are you arguing your point? Are you arguing because you're trying to save face and you want to be right? Or are you really trying to get to a good solution that meets people's needs? Easy for me to say in a podcast. Try that in your marriage.
Yeah. I think that answer is so valuable because it provides some action. A lot of people say I need to work on my humility, but it's like, how do I do that? In this instance, you can say, well, I might be too confident, so maybe I need to scale up my vulnerability to match my confidence, or I might be too vulnerable and I need to scale up my confidence to match my vulnerability.
I think to that point, Justin, humble leaders are confident leaders. I used to think that humility meant you were shy, quiet, retiring, meek. I thought humility was something I ate for lunch. And as I grew up, I realized, no, humility is born out of confidence. Confident people are capable of being humble. They don't have to share all their ideas. They don't have to always be right. They don't have to win every argument. It's arrogant people who are incapable of demonstrating humility. This is something I struggle with. I'm not a naturally humble person. I'm not. I'm a naturally confident person. And I probably err on the side of arrogance because I was raised in the 70s to believe that it was the loud, hard-charging, take charge kind of person that built wealth and was in charge and won leadership. And so I kind of fashioned myself after that person and took on the personality of being always right and sort of fighting to the death. And, what I've realized is people don't want to marry that kind of person long-term. You might be attracted to it early on, but it becomes fatiguing when you have to win everything and always be right. Now, there are cases when I think humility and vulnerability can be taken too far and you become a victim. You come into a lose-win situation, right? And so a lot of people have a victim mentality. They don't think they deserve to win. They don't think they deserve to ever be right. Of course, that's not healthy either, right? It's coming back to this adage I mentioned. Humble leaders are more concerned with what is right. What is right for the business, the customer, the economy, the nation, society, your marriage, than being right. Ask yourself the next time you're in an argument, am I just trying to be right, or do I really want what's best for everyone that's involved?
You said that you don't think that people want to marry someone that you're always arguing with, but on the flip side, I don't think people want to marry someone that never fights back in an argument. So I think the tough part is that you just can't be one or the other. You kind of have to be both, which is like the sucky part, because every time you're like, I'm doing good in this instance, the next time you're not doing good because that's not what was required, right?
Are you married?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so you speak from a point of credibility. Yes. Every marriage is different. You hear these couples that are celebrating their 70th wedding anniversary, 70 years. We've never had an argument. I'm like, what? I felt like 4 this morning.
Right.
I'm not proud of that, but like, what? So I don't know. Every marriage is different. I think I've been married for 12 years. My wife is 12 years younger than I am. We have almost different generation. And I've got to be mindful of not always trying to win the battle, but win the war. I don't mean win the war like beat her, right? Sometimes we get so focused on our egos and our immediate needs that we're just determined to win the battle when you should be focused on winning the war. And the war is the long-term relationship, right?
Yeah.
My wife probably wishes I would take a dose of my own medicine this morning.
That's the hardest part about doing podcasts and writing books, I'm guessing, is that, every time you're always putting forth these really great ideas, and the people closest to you are like, you should read this book that this really cool guy wrote called Scott Miller or whatever.
Wait, were you listening to my marriage last night? Were you in the house?
That's awesome. We've talked a lot about self-awareness, which I find very fascinating because it's really hard, actually, because that confidence that we mentioned, every time you have that little bit of self-awareness, some doubt may start to creep in. What are some of the things that you've done to gain some of that self-awareness, but also temper it so that way your confidence isn't shaken?
Well, I think the most effective people have the highest level of self-awareness. I'll tell you, Justin, in my 35 years in business, I've had the privilege of interviewing thousands of candidates for jobs, right? And I've hired hundreds of people. And I've also had the unfortunate responsibility of terminating dozens of people over 30 years. And I've never to this day had to fire someone or terminate someone because their lack of technical competency. Like they had the degree, they had the know-how, they could do the job. They were just unwilling to. They lacked boundaries. They lacked taking personal responsibility. They lacked the ability to interact with others, to say they are sorry, to forgive others, to give credit to others, to take responsibility for their actions. They generally lacked self-awareness. They really had no idea what it was like to work with them or for them. That should haunt your listeners. I mean, I have had to terminate dozens of people every single time. It was because they lacked the self-awareness. Now, it might have been because their leader before me lacked the courage to tell them what it was like to work with them. Maybe they were so insecure that they were told and weren't willing to hear it, or insolent where they were told it, but they weren't willing to hear it. So this is an important phrase to double down on. If you want to improve every area of your life, you need to ask, what is it like to be married to me? What is it like to work with me? What's it like to launch a product, be on a Zoom call, be on a podcast, be at a trade show booth for 3 days? What is it like to go on a power walk with me? What's it like to walk dog? I mean, ask people, but you've got to make it safe for them to tell you the truth, because most people will lie to you. Oh, you're an awesome team member. Oh, you're lovely. Oh, I love going on. No, it's the ones that they'll say, you know what? I love walking dogs with you, but you know what? You never shut up. You talk for the entire 45 minutes. You never ask me a question about me. All you do is talk about yourself. So if you want to increase your self-awareness, you ask Justin, after this podcast is over, what's it like to have me as a guest? And when Justin tells you the truth, you don't refute it, rebut it, dispute it. Say, yeah, but I was on a roll. No, you just listen and say, thank you for sharing that. That's some courage. That's kind of embarrassing, but I'm so delighted you shared that. That's really valuable. I had no idea that I did that, or I talked for 12 minutes straight and kept interrupting you. So if you want to become more self-aware, which I think is the key to effectiveness in life, to know what it's like to go to a dinner party with you, what it's like to go golfing with you, what it's like to go on vacation with you, what it's like to go grocery shopping with you. You get the point, right? You'll make it safe for other people to tell you their truth. When they do give you feedback, you never dispute it. You write it down, and you can say, that is so valuable. Can I ask you, Justin, why do you think I do that? When I'm saying that or doing that, do I seem insecure? Do I seem jealous? Do I seem threatened? Do I seem in over my head? I know you're not a psychiatrist, but did you see or witness any situations that seem to repeat themselves where I do that? I love the feedback, because even though you may be the leader of the team, it doesn't mean you've got it going on all areas of your life. Leaders are just people who got promoted, right? Mm-hmm. Leaders are just people that took a risk to step outside of their comfort zone and try something new. So you've got to make it safe for people to tell you the truth. And that safety may look like, feel like, sound like different for each person.
One thing that I hate about doing this podcast is that every time I have a podcast interview, it somehow like aligns with exactly themes that are going on in my life. I don't know if it's God or whatever, but like messages that people are sending me. But this self-awareness of just constantly asking, what is it like to do this with you? Because I know that in my personal life, I'm always trying to do podcast things, and I can definitely let the relationships maybe go by the wayside, unfortunately. But I don't know if you've noticed that with your podcast, but that's something I see often with my podcast.
Yeah, my life has completely changed and improved as a result of 150 interviews and constantly being held accountable to what I've learned next. I think the key, after you ask for what's it like to be in an X situation with me, if you care, because some people are just checking the box, right? Oh, I asked for feedback and they gave it to me. But if you really want to build trust with that person, you have to take it beyond not interrupting them or not disputing it. You then have to decide, is that information worthy of integrating into my behaviors? Because when that person catches you changing your behavior in a future situation, now they become your biggest cheerleader. They become your biggest champion. When somebody else is perhaps criticizing you, they say, you know, I've had a very different experience with Scott. He asked me about that same situation. I gave him the feedback. He handled it really well, better than I thought he would. And you know what? In the next meeting, I saw him actually changing. Maybe you give him a chance also. You'll see that the loyalty around you will grow when people catch you integrating that feedback into your behaviors. Now, not all feedback is helpful, right? You can't ask feedback on every moment of every interaction. It'll become overwhelming. And a lot of feedback won't be about you. It'll be about them being jealous of you. It'll be about their ex-husband who acts like you, or their ex-boss who sounds like you. So you can overwhelm yourself in too much feedback, especially as marketers, right? I mean, you can focus group yourself into, insanity. So you've got to be really deliberate around who you ask and how valuable do you find that feedback.
Yeah. I'm really happy that you brought up marketing, because that's a topic that I actually love. I'm in digital marketing myself in my day job. But before we transition over to that, one last question. You mentioned that not everyone should be a leader. Not everyone should be promoted to manager or whatever. I think most people will eventually be a leader, at least in their family at some point. But who are the people that should aspire to leadership?
Justin, superb question. Let me clarify something. When I said not everyone should be a leader, I mean not everyone should be a leader of people. I think people can lead their lives, they can lead their 401k, they can lead a project, but not everyone should be a leader. Just like not everyone should be a commercial airline pilot. Not everyone should be a podiatrist, me first amongst them, right? There's this fallacy that organizations have perpetuated, which is the only way to earn more money, have more influence, have more power, get promoted, is to lead people. It's horrifying. Not everyone should lead people, and that's just fine. Every company needs the vast majority of people to be individual contributors, crushing their contribution and leaving. But if you are going to lead people, there are some commonalities, and here's what they are. And let me disclose this first. I'm not sure I should have been a leader of people. Like a lot of top salespeople, I was crushing it quarter in, quarter out, blowing through my goal, President's Club, Maui, trophies, all of that. And then, of course, I just felt like, well, if I want to feel more important, if I want to earn more money, if I want to have a seat at the table, I got to lead people. So I get promoted. And now I'm like a tyrannical jackass trying to turn everybody reporting to me into miniature versions of me. Because I thought, well, my job is to have everybody do the same thing I'm doing. No, my job was to have people achieve the same outcomes that I was getting, recognizing that everybody has a different level of skill set and joy and passion and fears and trauma and horror, and everybody has different skills. How do I take their skills and nurture them and blossom them so they can achieve the same results? I think the best people that make the best leaders are people who take sheer joy in the success of other people, that they genuinely take great delight and pride in seeing other people around them succeed. Now, that's not everybody. In fact, I'll tell you that it wasn't always me. I can be petty. I'm highly competitive. I'm jealous. And most people on your podcast won't say I'm jealous. Most of them, you won't hear them say I'm a petty person. I can't be petty. And so I'll tell you, I'm not sure I should have been a leader of people, but great leaders are those who take delight in the joy of others' success. They generally feel validated when someone who reports to them gets promoted over them, makes more money than them, that they realize that their contribution is to build the confidence and skills of other people around them, is that they take delight in the success of those around them. And let me tell you, there are people who do not take the delight in success of people around them. That doesn't make them a bad person. That makes them a person. And so I don't want to demonize people that shouldn't be leaders of people. No, I think you should go and crush your job, do the best you can, and go live your life. Because not everybody should be defined by their career. In fact, none of us should be defined by our careers. But for not all of us, our vocation isn't our advocation. The number one criteria is taking delight in the success of those around you. Patience, listening, recognizing that your way isn't the only way, that there are other ways to achieve success other than just your proven process. I think I hear this phrase so often, well, I've got 30 years of experience. No, what you probably have is 1 year of experience repeated 29 times. And as great leaders, you recognize there are more ways to achieve success than just your own proven way. And are you abundant enough? Are you patient enough? Are you confident enough to allow other people to explore their own way? Or do you have to formulaically fit them into your mindset? Those are the types of people I think who make the best people leaders. And I don't think naturally I'm one of them.
Being honest, I don't think, okay, I think the amount of people who are naturally just gung-ho about every other person's success is rather slim. I think that's, one of the big characteristics that really set Jesus Christ apart. And, he's one in 17 billion or something, however many people have ever existed. But I love that answer so much because it's not just an answer of who should rise to become a leader or should work on becoming a leader, but it's also kind of a guide on how to improve your leadership. Really look at what does success mean for those you lead and try and help them with that.
And in your friendships as well. The next time your friend comes to you and tells you something they did, don't match it. Don't one-up it. Don't share your own story. Completely check your own timeline, your own narrative, your own motives. Consciously check in. Say, Justin, that's amazing. Tell me more about that. Oh my gosh, how hard was that? How did that feel? I'm delighted for you. Don't share your own story. Don't talk about yourself at all. Just authentically take joy in his success. Don't say, oh my gosh, I know I did the same thing and that fish fought forever. And what did you experience? No. It's not about you. It's about Justin. And you know what? You can train yourself into finding joy in other people's successes. The next time you're on a walk or a hike or you're playing racquetball and someone shares something, don't share your own experience. Don't top their story. Just check in to what they're saying. And don't ask any questions on your own narrative. Just say, tell me more. Sounds amazing. What was that like? I'm delighted for you. That's awesome, man. Do not compare your own journey to their journey. That takes practice. That takes abundance. That takes caring about the other person and moving outside of all that. What's going on in your life, just checking into their life. That's called friendship.
Yeah, it's also called marriage, I'd say. But switching to marketing, I know we haven't had a chance to talk about that. One of the biggest questions I had was, you have 30 challenges and 30 marketing messes that you outline in your book. What would you say is the most common marketing mess that people have in their life or brand or business, whatever organization they're in?
Oh, wow. You're right. All the books that I write in the Mess of Success series are built around 30 challenges. move from mess to success, right? Some of them are define your smallest viable market. Another one is acumen. You mentioned friend your competition. Be willing to change your mind. Decide your own tenure. Hire people smarter than you. I think the one that I like the most, challenge 7, which is bruise hard and heal fast. In marketing, you're going to have all kinds of ideas. Everyone's going to have an opinion on your campaign, on your initiative. Nobody ever has an idea on accounting or finance or IT, but everybody's got an idea on marketing. Everybody's an expert marketer. So you've got to learn how to bruise hard and heal fast. Pivot on a dime, right? You spend 3 weeks cooking up this campaign, you present it to your version of the board of directors or to the owner or whatever it is, and they say, yeah, that's not very good. And now you've got a choice to defend it, evangelize it, bring them over to your genius, shame them, or you simply are able to detach your own sort of self-worth from the hard work and pivot on a dime. Bruise hard, heal fast. And to your point, that's good marriage advice. That's good relationship advice. But in marketing, you can't get caught up in your ego cannot be caught up in your own design, your own creativity. Are you agile enough? Are you mentally, intellectually nimble enough to have a plan B, have a plan C, have a plan D, and say, okay. And you can think to yourself, okay, that idiot doesn't see my team's genius, but he's the boss, and so she funds the project. So here's my next idea. Here's our next idea. Or what are you? Or is there something you're looking for that you're not finding we're delivering on? Could you take some more time and maybe better articulate what does success look like? What part of this are you most annoyed with so I can be sure that our team doesn't go down the same path again, right? Is check your defensiveness, check your frustration, because people can feel it. I share some great stories in the book about how the CEO rejected several of my campaigns, and I could have dug in. I could have probably won the battle, but I would have lost the war, because on many occasions I saw the CEO try to give feedback to otherwise very competent leaders, and they dug in, and then he realized, okay, this isn't about the best idea. This is about their ego. This is about their need to, and I saw it diminish their credibility over time. They won the battle, but they lost the war. And the war was their reputation, their influence, their confidence, their ability to say to the boss, well, this is frustrating. Thanks a lot, but I understand. Can you peel the onion with me and tell me what parts do you like? What parts do you outright hate? Are there some things that you keep telling me that you feel like I'm not hearing? Because I'm willing, what are you wanting that you feel I'm not listening? And can I tell you, that is every boss's dream come true, is the marketing that says, okay, I'm checking my ego. What is it you think I'm not hearing? Say it straight, talk straight, I can handle it. What is it I'm missing? What do I keep digging in on that you feel like I'm not being nimble enough on? That's every leader's dream person. Bruise hard and heal fast. And I've got, like all the chapters, the challenges, I share stories of successes and messes, when I did it right, when I did it wrong. I think the book can bring up to life a lot of wisdom from my own 30-year sales and marketing career.
I think one thing that I really liked about the book, more than I like marketing. I'm in digital marketing. I do SEO specifically, and I love talking marketing. But what I think I loved about the book was it applies outside of marketing just to everyone. Bruise hard, heal fast. You're welcome. It's great advice, like you said, especially and for our listeners, just a little kind of litmus test to help you understand when you are doing it wrong or when you are doing it right. Ask, what is this about? Like Scott said, if it's about your ego, you're doing it wrong. If it's about doing what's right, then you do have that ability to say, yes, this idea I have is right. But then when it's about what's right, you can also pivot and change it and focus on what's right. I like the book very much because it did speak to me about how I can improve as a person, but also how I can improve in my career. So I just wanted to say that real quick.
Thank you, Justin. The first book, as you know, was Management Mess to Leadership Success. I really write leadership books under the guise of certain disciplines. My next book is Job Mess to Career Success, comes out in January. That's going to be followed by Communication Mess to influence success. And then there'll be sales mess, parenting mess, relationship mess. There's a whole series planned over the next decade.
That's awesome. I'll be honest. I'm a prospective parent. My wife and I, in the next decade or so, who knows? We hope to have at least one kid. God willing, I guess. But that's one book that I am particularly looking forward to, because every person, you'd be surprised how many people I bring on the podcast. We didn't talk about much about this, but I've had a Navy SEAL on the show, an ex Major League Baseball player, and I think it was an NFL football player, and all three of them said that parenting was the hardest thing that they've done. And I have that constant, in my face. So I definitely want to prepare, but thank you so much, Scott, for being on the show. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I've really enjoyed your insights. I didn't get to most of the questions that I wrote down, but that's okay, because we had a very good conversation. How can our audience reach out to you, see what you're up to, and support you?
Thanks, Justin. My pleasure. You're a superb podcast host. This is why yours is so successful.
Thank you.
You can visit me at scottjeffreymiller.com. All my books, my podcast, my keynote opportunities are there. You can Google Scott Miller, Google Mess to Success. All the books are, of course, available on Amazon. You can follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. But scottjeffreymiller.com is my website. And I'd love to have people follow me and reach out to me. And if you want to buy the books, I think you'll find them riotously funny. I share a lot of outrageous stories about mistakes I made and my own foibles in life. And I'm just honored to be on your podcast today. Thanks again for the stage.
Yeah, thank you. Also, audience, go subscribe to the On Leadership podcast with Scott Miller. You can listen to all sorts of really influential people. I saw the list of guests you have in the book, what you listed out, and I was I was really, really, really impressed. So definitely go follow him. But Scott, before we let you go, we need to give our audience some action items. So these are the action items I came up with based on what we've talked about. Number 1, try being vulnerable. Number 2 is to practice self-awareness. Number 3 is to work on your humility, parentheses, confidence times vulnerability. And then number 4 is to practice taking joy in your friends' successes. Are there any action items that you wanted to add to that list?
I would say understand the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. When I opened, I mentioned that our company, Franklin Covey, was founded by Dr. Stephen R. Covey, who wrote the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That book now, of course, has sold 40 million copies in 30 years, and it's probably the best-selling personal development book in the history of books. And there's a difference between being effective and being efficient. I'm a very productive, efficient person. I get more stuff done than anybody I know. It's been the key to my success in most of my professional life. The problem is when I move that efficiency mindset into my relationships, because you cannot be efficient with people. You can mow the lawn fast, you can take out the garbage fast, you can wash the car fast, you can post on social fast, you can cook dinner fast, you can do everything fast in life, except for developing relationships. And with people, you cannot be efficient. You must slow down and be effective. This is a major challenge for me. With people, slow is fast. Fast is slow. So if you're all like me, where one of your biggest assets in life is your productivity, your efficiency, don't stop that. Just recognize when you're falling into that trap with your relationships. You cannot be efficient with people. You can only be effective. And I think it's the most effective people that know when they're being efficient and when to stop that and move into being effective. That's probably the wisest advice I've ever received in my life.
Wow, it's like talking to myself in the mirror, because that's definitely something I focus on and I struggle with, and I need to focus on more. So audience, those action items are going to be up in the show notes, as well as how to reach out to Scott. But definitely follow him on his podcast. Go get his books. Thank you so much, Scott, for being here on the Hard Thing podcast with me. I found it incredibly insightful, and it's given me a lot of things personally to go work on in my life. So I have to thank you for that.
Justin, thank you for turning your spotlight on to me today. You just proved you're a great leader, because you are as invested in my success as your own. To that, I'm grateful, and I will reciprocate as well. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you guys so much for listening to that episode. Seriously, go check out Scott on his podcast. Go get his books. I really enjoyed listening to his book. Again, one of my favorite parts about his book, Marketing Myths to Brand Success, is the fact that it's a really good career development book. It's really good information on how to be a better employee and how to rise through the ranks and get better positions, if that's so desirable to you. And also, like we talked about in the podcast, a lot of really good marriage advice, a lot of good parenting advice. It was just a great podcast conversation, and I was just thrilled to have Scott on the show. So go reach out to him on his socials, go reach out to him on his website, go get his books. Give him a lot of love because he deserves it just for being on the show. He was a great guest. But come back on Thursday for our Thursday show, The Forge, where we actually put into practice the action items you just heard. We're going to go deep, try and talk about how you can do these as well. We'd also like to encourage you to follow the podcast. Just click that button, follow on any podcast app that you listen to, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, whichever you listen to. And then also, we'd like to invite you to get a consultation from a business or fitness or whatever coach that can help you improve your life. So go to thehardthingpodcast.com/trainers, and you can click on whichever area of your life you're really focusing on. Right now, we only have business, fitness, and life coaching available, but you'll get a free consultation from any one of these coaches. And a lot of them have actually been on the podcast, so you can hear them. If you go back and listen to them, you can hear what they talk about. But go to thehardthingpodcast.com/trainers, get your free consultation today. And then if you want to, you can sign up for their services, which does help the podcast. And for that, we'd be very grateful. Last but not least, we'd like to talk to you about Operation Underground Railroad. They're a nonprofit organization that goes undercover to rescue kids from sex trafficking. They're an essential organization for stopping the sickness that is slavery. Slavery is unfortunately alive and well. We want to put an end to it. So go to OURrescue.org, learn about what they're all about, get involved, and hopefully we can rescue some kids. That's a lot, guys, but I know that if you listen to today's podcast with an open heart, an open mind, and maybe a pen and paper to write down some ideas, you will have some direction in your life. You will have some way to go, some path to walk that will get you where you want to go. So all I have left to say is go do some hard things because you will overcome average.